Okay, so what we have happening here is the light image is going to be absorbed by what's known as a photoemissive material. In other words, photo meaning photons or electrons. So there's going to be a conversion in this photocathode. That's our first section. So it's important to know what happens first, right? We said input phosphor receives our X-rays, right? Then we go into the photocathode. So input phosphor comes first, we said is the cesium. Then we have our photocathode. Right, that's going to convert our light into electrons. The electrons are going to be accelerated, so there's a potential difference. There's some kilovoltage that is applied across this tube to, similar to an X-ray tube, get our electrons from the cathode side to the anode side of this tube. Right, so sounds almost like an X-ray tube. So we're seeing kV yet again. We already have a cathode and an anode. Now our electron image is going to be focused on the much smaller output phosphor that you see here to the right. That output phosphor, which is responsible for taking this beam of electrons that's been concentrated by our electrostatic lenses, and the output phosphor made out of what's known as zinc cadmium sulfide will convert it to a nice small bright image. In other words, we're going to get light at the end of this. So light occurs twice, but we're actually going to have many more light photons at the output phosphor than we did by the conversion at the input phosphor at the beginning. So here again, we're basically breaking out that diagram, and I want to give you an example of the proportions of what we achieve by converting. So if you were to start with just one incident X-ray, now remember, of course, there's really going to be billions of them, correct? We hit our input phosphor, and we've separated these two just to make it look a little bit better. Remember, they're actually sandwiched pretty much together. That one incident of X-ray gives us about 1,000 light photons. Those light photons then interact with our photocathode and turn that light into electrons. So here we have our little E minuses, our little electrons, and those kind of stream down. See, we're concentrating that beam so that we reach this zinc cadmium sulfide output phosphor. Here you can see it actually kind of looks like a cylinder. And we have just tripled our light photons from what we had at the input phosphor. We went from 1,000 to 3,000. So that's our improvement in light. And that's what we need to be captured so we can get, really at the end of the day, very nice bright images. Right. So all of this is contained in a glass envelope. We said that our input phosphor is cesium iodide. It's going to be converted to visible light. So that's the first set of light. Remember, that's that 1,000 figure. Our light then interacts with the photocathode, right? So it takes a lot of light photons to cause the emission of just a few electrons. So if you go back for a second, you know, it seems like we go up, down, and up, and that's exactly what's happening. So it doesn't take a lot of X-rays to produce a lot of light photons originally, but notice we go from 1,000 light photons to just 50 or so what's known as photoelectrons. Right, so it takes a lot of light photons to create an electron. But then we, at the output phosphor again, we then produce about 3,000 light photons. Right. So the number of electrons emitted is directly proportional. So if we keep increasing the intensity, in other words, that's a quantity term. If we increase the amount of X-rays that we send through, we're going to get more light, more electrons, and then even more light at the zinc cadmium sulfide anode. Right. Here you can actually see on the screen, here's some barium. This is a static image, right? If it was fluoroscopy, it would be more like a movie. So what we also need to do here is we need to take those electrons and really, really get them to move quickly across the tube. And the way we do that is add our potential difference, which is our kV, but then we're also going to focus them onto this output phosphor, and we utilize these what's known as electron optics, right? What they are really going to do is take a negative charge and push that negative charge towards the electrons. The electrons being of a negative polarity will also be kind of squashed together, right? So we're literally using uh, sort of magnetic forces to concentrate that beam of electrons, as well as the kV, the kilovoltage, to push them across the tube. Right. So each photoelectron, right, when it arrives at the output phosphor, will produce 50 to 75 times as many light photons that were needed to create it. So again, in our example from before, we started with one incident X-ray, turning into 1,000 um, photons of light, which then turned into only about 50 photoelectrons, but then those photoelectrons turn into 3,000 light photons. Now your fluoroscopic unit also has some magnification modes, right? They can operate in either what's known as a regular mode or a magnification mode. And the magnification mode uses a smaller area of the input screen, so let's say a 6-inch diameter versus a 9-inch diameter. So many of the fluoroscopic units out there can do what's known as magnification, right? And in that case, they're known as multi or dual field intensifiers. And you have several examples here. You have a 25 versus 17 versus a 12 centimeter, right? And these work in a inversed manner, in that when you decrease your magnification mode, you actually increase the view of the image, right? So, for example, uh, this here is a larger diameter than the one on the right, yet the image is going to be smaller. Here we have a smaller diameter, yet the image here is going to be larger when it gets magnified. And just like any other magnification function, as we learned last year, when you magnify an image, you're going to lose some of the detail, right? Except we said we're going to call it spatial resolution. Also, there is an effect on the dose to the patient, right? Patient doses are slightly higher when you magnify the image. Let's see. Okay, bear with me 1 second. We'll stop here for just a moment.